Forgive me, the recording part, I'm still trying to get a hang of. All right. We did have more people accept the invite, but I know summer plans make it kind of fun. Hello, my name is Debra Ryan. I'm Special Education Director for Windsor Unified School District. I just kind of wanted to take a moment to kind of just have everyone introduce themselves, and if you wouldn't mind sharing with us where your name, where your students from. Let me put up a form here. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay, good. Wanted to make sure. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing your name, what school your child goes to, and what are your hopes for being a part of this group? What are you hoping our end results are going forward? So Ms. Coase, would you mind starting us off? You're muted. It's a love-hate relationship with Zoom.
There we go. Sorry. My name is Monica. I have a daughter named Claire who is going to be a sophomore at Windsor High School. What my hopes, dreams for this group. I'm not entirely sure. We've been, she's been special ed for her entire academic career. Things changed a little bit for high school with requirements to get her a diploma. So I guess for me, part of it's the curiosity there. But our family has had incredible support, luck, teachers, speech, OT, the whole 9 yards going through. I think we've been lucky to some regard. I'm grateful we're in this district for sure. But I guess for me too, going forward is, if I can play a part in making sure other families have a similar experience, that would be worthwhile to me, because I think we had a really good one. We're sort of getting to the end of the road with it. So if I can be helpful in any way, but I'm also curious to kind of see, what the next few years hold and the district's support in getting her beyond high school.
Ms. Karbowski?
Hi, my name is Jennifer and my son is Ryan. He's 15. He's at the Windsor High School.
I'm going to want you to be quiet, okay?
He's in the NCC program where he's been for probably the last 6 years. I think we moved to Windsor. Let's see. My hopes about being part of the group, I hadn't really thought of it, but more along the lines of making NCC and special ed in Windsor more of a community, more like it's just so separated.
I agree with you.
You just don't really feel like you're part of the school when you're in NCC. And just the turnover with the teachers is really, really concerning. And I don't think it's all about money for the teachers. So I think if we create a better community that the teachers in NCC or in special ed in Windsor School District feel more supported, that we will have a better program. So I guess that's my hope, is being part of that change, being part of that. I want to have a new teacher every single year for my son. I know that's different because in high school you have different teachers, but an NCC program, for a community-based program for a child that doesn't like change, isn't flexible, it's very hard.
Yeah. Well, a consistent special education case manager. Right. Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Hi, I'm Samantha Jacobs, part of the qualified, he had an IEP for a while. I was kind of just curious, I didn't realize, I thought there was going to be more of a presentation I just kind of want to keep tabs on what the vision is for it, what's available. Personally, we haven't had a great experience, and it's due to a number of factors, but it is frustrating to me because my child is unique. He doesn't fit a lot of the molds in terms of, he doesn't have a lot of things that are in the past. He didn't have a lot of things that we had identified that were long-term. So it was sort of this fluctuating situation, but I feel like the system isn't designed for that. So you're either in or you're out. And I feel like there's been a lot of overlooking the least restrictive environment for him, while then sometimes he gets in the most restrictive, and then when we do least restrictive, then all the services disappear. So I haven't had a great experience, honestly, and so he actually, we're kind of in limbo. He was exited against our wishes, and I don't know where we stand, honestly. So
Okay. Well, I remember our meeting, so thank you. I'm so appreciative that you popped in here. So I'm not, I don't know if you all are aware, but I've done a presentation once already that kind of gave a brief background of the district. I'm at the end of being here for 1 full year. So this year's been mostly assessment of where we are and what's happening. And then, so if you go to our district's YouTube channel, and I think it's even linked on our website and in the special education department, I did do a presentation which gave a background of the history of the district and what items we'll be working on. And Ms. Jacobs, you mentioned a couple of things that I'm just briefly going to touch on, but the purpose of this group is to get your input on what you feel is important for our district. I want to be in communication with parents so that the information that's going out and coming in is consistent and flowing, and to kind of lessen some of the miscommunication that I've been experiencing this year, some of the rumors of what was happening or what is happening, but mostly just to keep a pulse on what's best for kids and some of the changes we're making starting this year and what our path is going forward for the next 3 years. Ms. Schiff, I see you popped on here. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group and just kind of let us know what your name is? Do you have any children in the district? And if so, where are they going to school? And what's your hope for being a part of this group?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry I joined late. My name is Virginia. My son is 7 and he's going to Mary Washburn. He's gonna start 2nd grade. And I just wanna be kind of try to collaborate with the district in any way possible to make sure that our kids have the best education possible. And I do appreciate the efforts about inclusion. And I'm really hoping to learn as much as possible about the school system. I'm from another country, so year by year I learn something new. So anything I can do to help out, that's my hope. And I'm bilingual, so anything that I also can do to kind of be help out with the Spanish speaking community, that's really important to me as well, even though my son is not a Cali. So yeah, thank you for arranging this.
Thank you. And thank you for that. So all of our meetings going forward will be recorded, and they're going to be placed on our YouTube channel. The reason for that is that YouTube allows the closed captioning to be translated in real time. So we know that we do have some Spanish speaking parents. When school's in session, my goal is to have meetings that are specifically in Spanish as we get more and more parents involved. My hope is that more and more parents will be involved. So I do appreciate your offering of being available in Spanish as well. So I'm not, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to go too much into the previous presentation that I did, but I am going to go and just kind of briefly mention what it is that we focused on last time. Sorry, I'm trying to get the slideshow going. So in our previous meeting, I went over the fact that again, this last school year has been my first year with the district. And I walked into the fact that our district is in monitoring for all the items you see here. And what monitoring means is we've been identified as needing to improve in these areas, specifically for students in special education. Again, these are some things that that existed before I got here, but I'm excited that we're going to be creating systems within our district that not only will improve these targets for kids in special ed, but it's going to be improving services for all students. So I will provide you, the people that are in this meeting today, I'll go back and email you a link for that presentation, so you don't have to go searching for it on our website. And it kind of goes further into what areas that we're going to be working on improvements for and how we've targeted it. This particular slide, again, is from the previous presentation, and it just kind of outlines for you within the next 3 years, what's going to be the focus of the special education department on how we can improve services. And so today in my discussion with you, I just kind of want to focus on this next year and kind of get your input in some of the things we have planned, but then get additional input from you in what you want some focus for improvement or to strengthen things that you think are going well already. As of the last day, the last full week of school, the district had a total of 4,710 students enrolled. And of that, 754 students were in special education. That includes students enrolled in our NCC program. That gives us a percentage of 16% of students in our district are categorized as in special education. The national average, it just very much, there's a huge range. You have some areas that have 8%, and then you have some very high needs areas that are as high as 20%. A national average, a good average is between 11 and 12%. So we are unusually high. At the beginning of this school year, our district had over 17% of its students in special education. We really focused this year and zeroed in on what is truly eligible for special education. And so you see an appropriate reduction. The difference between being eligible for special education and a student just being eligible for perhaps a 504, a student to be eligible for special education has to have an identified disability, but they also have to show a need for specially designed instruction. So we have some students that have disabilities, but they're able to appropriately access the curriculum in the gen ed setting with just some accommodations and some support services. So that doesn't mean necessarily that they qualify for special education. One of the things that, if I go back to this slide here, one of the things that the district has been identified as needing to improve and is that we are disproportionately and over identifying students for special education. Ms. Ms. Kos and Ms. Jacobs, you both mentioned needing a level and a continuum of services for students who don't quite fit into this type, needing this, or needing this. So as we go through, and I have like 4 slides because this is more of a discussion group. I'm hoping that I'm going to reiterate the district moving forward with creating that full continuum of services. And again, I'll supply you with the previous presentation, which also gets into that somewhat. All right. Something that the district's doing and fully implementing next year, which plays a part in special ed, but it's really not special ed driven, is creating what we called a multi-tiered system of support. Most of the, and excuse me for using kind of lax terms, most of the fixes that need to happen for special education to be appropriate in this district are actually a gen ed fix, meaning that we need to service students of all varying needs. We need to service students before they get to the point that they even need special education. So that's one of the initiatives that Jeremy Decker, our superintendent, this is his first in-person year. He started during COVID. And so this is something he very much supports. And your district administrators, we started mid-year, and we're also working through the summer to create those multi-tiered supports and to get it implemented and have gen ed teachers implement it going forward. So most of the items in this categorization, although they're really not special education involved, it plays a huge part in at what point does special ed take over, and it plays a huge part in what we do going forward. So the first level of support is that tier 1. This happens with all students, and the focus of that is basically pre-intervention, using different modalities of instruction, of services, so that we're adapting the way that our teachers teach, so it's reaching all of our students. We know that the school system, the American school system, was created back in the industrial times, where kids really only attended a few hours a day, and it was geared towards students sitting still, listening, getting instruction, and then leaving and going to work. We know kids don't learn that way anymore. So therefore, we have to adjust the way we teach. So we're moving to a multi-methodology of instruction. And although I'm I work in the special education department, I'm working with gen ed teachers to introduce to them to what I call a multi-sensory approach to teaching. So we know that some students learn best by doing, some learn best by listening, by watching. So we're trying to help teachers learn how to teach using all these different methods together at the same time while they're teaching core content. And that way it's going to reach all levels of learning. So we're looking at the way teachers teach all students. That second tier that you see there in the yellow, those are for our students who need just a little bit more. These could be students who might need certain accommodations to access the curriculum, but they're still able to stay in the whole group and with just some little interventions, and sometimes just pull out for small groups. Those are students who just need a little bit of extra help. And then that very top tier of support, those are your students who are in special ed that need that specially designed instruction. And that could be also students who are on a 504 who just need a higher level of intervention. So as the district moves forward, what's going to be available to all students is that MTSS approach. Any questions on that? Okay. So out of all those elements that I identified at the beginning that the district is tagged for improvement, the biggest thing that special education is going to focus on this year, which is, and I'll go over in a minute, will have a ripple effect, is that element 5A that we've been targeted for is making sure that our students, regardless of their need, can stay in the gen ed environment. One of the things that I identified very early on is anytime we pull a student out of the general education classroom, we're changing what they're learning. And so every time you pull a student from their core content instructional class, whether it's an alternative curriculum or whether it's the general ed curriculum, every time you're pulling them for other services, they're missing that instruction. So our goal is to reduce the amount of time students are out of their gen ed class. And when I say gen ed, for our students with higher needs that qualify for an alternative curriculum, this also involves them staying in that classroom for their instruction. And some of the things we're going to be doing to increase this is we're implementing a co-teaching model starting at the beginning of the year. That's happening on all campuses. So we're identifying students that are able to do the same curriculum and are able to stay in the gen ed classroom for the majority of the curriculum instruction, but we're putting special education teachers in those environments so we can give real-time services while the teaching is happening. The special ed teacher is going to also be doing some of those specialized whole group instructions to reach those other students that just have a little bit of need. That's going to allow all kids to stay in the gen ed environment, get that core content instruction, so they're not losing content area instruction. We're using the same curriculum regardless. That's happening in the gen ed environment. So even those students that are coming out for resource support or might get a bulk of, may need a big chunk of instruction in the special education classroom, we're going to be using the same curriculum that's going on in the gen ed classroom and accommodating it at a level that all students can get. What's been happening in our district in the past is when those kids are being pulled out of the gen ed classroom, they've been getting ability level curriculum. And so it's kind of makes it impossible for us to keep those kids at the same pace and get them back into the classroom for the majority of their day. So we're really aligning what we do with what's going on in the gen ed environment. And then what I described in the previous presentation is we're creating that full continuum of services. So historically in the district, when a student qualified for special education, we were pulling them out of gen ed into a resource or into an SDC self-contained classroom or into our higher needs NCC self-contained classroom. Sometimes students maybe just need support in math, or we have students that are in a self-contained room that maybe are higher in math and they can be pushed out to resource or into the gen ed. But we're going to start utilizing all those spaces in between. It's not going to be this, or this. Some students will go to co-teaching, maybe get pulled out for occasional resource support. But basically all students are going to be in the gen ed environment at some point of their day. We will not have any students that are in a special education environment 100% of their day. We want to make sure they have access to the same things that all students do. So specials, PE. Ms. Karbowski, you mentioned NCC being isolated. I 100% agree with you. I didn't fully understand what that was till probably about middle year, because when I started, the information that was given to me led me to believe that we were just supplying facilities. I didn't understand what that meant. So now that I do, that those students are ours, whether they live in our district or not. All parents, if your student is in an NCC classroom at the middle school, then they are a middle school student. They will be, all parents and all students will be included in the same communications, the same opportunities like parent nights, assembly nights, extracurricular activities. That's already been remedied. So whatever communication that you felt isolated with just NCC students, that's already been fixed. So starting with the next school year, there's not going to be that label of NCC. There might be, your student will be a student that attends Windsor Middle School that has various needs throughout the day, and it might be serviced in a special education classroom. So if you find that there's still a lag in that communication, if there's still a lag in being a part of the school community, this is the whole purpose of what we're doing today. Please, you're going to bring that back to the group, and we're going to keep putting things in place till we get all those things fixed. Okay. So knowing that our #1 priority next year is to make sure students stay in their gen ed environment as much as possible, or stay in their homeroom and push out into the gen ed environment as much as possible, we will see a ripple effect from that. So by keeping students in the gen ed environment as much as possible, we're going to lessen the number, we're going to improve on our placement disproportionality. Our placement disproportionality is saying that we have too many students who are outside of the gen ed curriculum for more than, they're outside of the gen ed. They are in the gen ed environment for 40% or lower of their day. We want to increase that. And then by having students stay with their gen ed peers as much as possible, we should be able to see a lessening of students in private placement. By engaging students in learning grade level content, being with their peers, increasing student engagement, we should see less absence from our students with disabilities. By having access to that gen ed grade level curriculum, we should see math and language arts achievement improve. And by getting them into gen ed, getting them aligned to the gen ed curriculum, we should see more of our students with special needs graduate with a diploma. By keeping them in the gen ed environment, we're creating that full continuum of services. So we're minimizing the amount of time that students are pulled out of the gen ed setting. And when appropriate, we should see a reduction of students in special education. They should only be in special education if they actually need that specially designed instruction. We've been using special education as a catch-all for trying to meet the needs of learners who don't always who have needs that are outside of that gen ed environment. So we're increasing the range of services that we have and appropriately identifying students for special education. So with that little short summary of what we did, and knowing that you're going to have access to that previous presentation, what I'm wanting to ask all of you is, aside from the focus of making sure increasing the time students are in the gen ed environment, what do you want the focus of our group, our community discussion group, what do you want our focus to be? And then once we've identified what we want our focus to be, then I can kind of drill down and get more information and bring it back to you so we can start to kind of problem solve, and together we can get parents the information and the supports that you feel like what you're hearing that they need, or what you yourself have experienced that they need. And I'm done with the bulk of talking. So I would like for you to kind of share with me what you want. What do you want our focus to be as a community discussion group? That makes sense?
I have
No, go ahead.
okay. I have two things that come to mind. Pardon the noise in the background.
You're fine. We all have kids.
I for me, what I keep hearing is, and again, we're at the end of the road, we're heading to our sophomore year of high school, but I keep hearing about the students, and the continuum. My concern, having been a teacher at one point also, is it in this ongoing plan, drilling down on giving our gen ed teachers adequate training, because it sounds, from what I'm understanding, and the goal is to get as many kids in gen ed for as long as they possibly can be there every day, which is the best thing ever, you know, for the kids that can do it. And I think it's a noble pursuit. But are the gen ed teachers that will have a co-teacher, but if their numbers of special ed students are increasing, I would hope that their training then is increased as well, and that they are adequately trained for that. Because if the special ed numbers are going up in the gen ed setting, it would only seem fair that gen ed teachers are adequately trained for their own comfort, not even just, I mean, of course, focusing on students and giving them the best, but that, you know, they feel comfortable doing what they're doing because they've been given the training to do it.
Right. So I can definitely tell that you are speaking from a teacher's lens. So thank you.
Also, as a parent who
Yes.
had gen ed teachers saying, I wish I knew more to help your kid, because my daughter thankfully was in gen ed with a paraeducator for most of her elementary school experience. And we had great teachers, but I had a number of them say, I wish I knew more to help her, because the para can only do so much. And if they're also running a small group, and, you know, the gen ed teachers, you know, said, you know, would ask, how can I help more? Because they just, you know, I've had a number of them feel like they didn't have as much information as they could to serve those kids.
Sure.
And then the other piece is communication. I found out this year, we went into her freshman year in small group instruction in high school, because the paraeducator doesn't exist really in that setting the way that it did. And my daughter needed some accommodations that weren't going to exist in gen ed. And so we did small group instruction freshman year with the understanding she could get a diploma. It wasn't till I was asked to register her for sophomore year, and I called, because small group instruction doesn't show up in Aries the same way. So I made a phone call and then was told that small group instruction wasn't going to get her to a diploma. So they have the co-teaching model, which I think will work for us. But had I not made that phone call, I'm not sure I would have been given that information for another 4 to 6 weeks when her IEP came up in the spring. And so, you know, I think making sure, especially for the kids that are kind of on the border, heading into middle school and high school, what those tracks actually look like to get them, you know, certification or diploma, because that changed for our family in 1 year. And it was only because I had picked up the phone to call somebody, was that information given to me then. I mean, I think I would have gotten it eventually, but it was a whole different registration process because small group was no longer an option. So those are the two things that kind of came up while you were talking.
So gen ed teachers, but it's definitely a focus. But that goes back to the slide about the multi-tiered supports. That is strictly gen ed driven and focused. So there is a whole gamut of trainings happening this year with gen ed teachers, both on full day PD days, and then also on those early release Wednesdays. We're really building up your special education teachers as being their whole education and training has been on specially designed instruction and appropriate accommodations. So we're really building them up as being the experts in that area. So they'll be providing 15-minute tidbit trainings every Wednesday for like a specific type of disability, a specific strategy. And your gen ed teachers, their whole focus is on core content instruction. So we're really building them up as those core content specialists. And so we're trying to really build those partnerships. But yes, we do have trainings planned. The communication regarding certification versus diploma, I was very surprised to see how many students we had on certificate track. And that's where I drill back down to why. And we get back to the very beginning when we start pulling kids out of the gen ed environment for services, that gap. So if you've got a student, I'll start with a second grader. If you have a student who maybe is struggling in reading, and so we start pulling them. Now, the gap, as you see, it's only like this little bit. Every time we pull them for resource support, so we're pulling them out to work on just reading fluency, but they're missing a whole period worth of reading instruction. So now they're missing more items. And so every time you pull them, this gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger because they're missing the instructional piece of content. So we're creating a gap where one didn't exist before every time we have to pull them out of the gen ed environment. So a student who missed, they get, if you have a student who needs supports and we can't keep them in that gen ed environment and accommodate the curriculum so they can learn it, they're not going to have the content knowledge to pass those state assessments, to move on to the next level of math or reading and writing. So by keeping kids in our gen ed environment, we're increasing that graduation rate. And we're really zeroing in, as you said, on high school. One of my discussions with the principal, and Mr. Williams is so supportive of students and special needs, he's the one that's looking for the alternative for those students who maybe even before they got to high school were on certificate track. We're getting them back on diploma track. So we're working with the curriculum, see where we can fill the gaps for some of those students that maybe got an abundance of special ed services, so we can get them back on certificate track. And Mary Beth Sandy, who was kind of in charge of special ed at the high school, she's actually going to be my program specialist next year for the special ed department. And her focus is going to be on that high school. And boy, does she have a plan for certificate versus diploma. And so part of what we're doing right now, she's going to do specifically for parents. And it'll be a discussion before kids even get to high school going forward. So thank you. I always feel good when I've already identified something, but I need to know what I'm not catching. So thank you for that. Anyone else have suggestions on what you want our focuses to be going forward? Ms. Jacobs?
I would just echo what Monica said about the teacher training piece of it. I guess this answers a lot of like our concerns, because it was either kind of all or nothing for us. And yet all felt like too much, but nothing, it was not facilitating anything either. So, and just today, like I was on another call with like a support group thing, and the one parent talked about like their child's need for like visual learning, and that their school had like color coding, but it wasn't just for SPED kids, it was just for all kids. Like science was always green, and social studies was always red. And so it just was like that across the board. And it seems like that speaks to all kids. But teachers have to be trained and systems have to be in place to influence that. So I'm excited about that, but I think it would be also interesting to see or to communicate to the general ed population as well. Because I think that like this went out to just people that have originally been in the SPED programs. The invite, I'm not sure, but I think that people will benefit from this that maybe haven't been identified too. And you'll see more kids thriving because of that as well. So again, that communication piece as well too. And it could be to gen ed too.
So I'll put sharing information outside the SPED community.
Yeah, I think so.
One of the things that I started probably this year has been an absolute blur and crazy. I think maybe towards the end of March is we do an internal newsletter, and I implemented a section called SPED Spotlight, and that goes to gen ed teachers. So we're starting to communicate with them about the diversity of the students in their class. But it would, I think I'm hearing you. I think I need to do that SPED Spotlight in our overall parent newsletter as well. So they know what we're working on. I know one of the things that our community, our communication coordinator is doing is going to be that proactive communication with parents about what things we're starting to implement and put in place. And I know that our superintendent Decker has a parent community group as well. So if you want to join that, it would be great to have that link between an individual department with the overall parent community. So if any of you want to get a hold of him for that, that might be a wonderful link as well. So, Ms. Schiff, I saw you undo your mic real quick. Do you want to share? Do you want to share a focal point?
Sure. Something that I would be interested in, kind of following up your comment about sharing information outside SPED community, is bringing a little bit more of information, or I would say awareness and tools for neurotypical kids, how to communicate and be more inclusive if we're gonna have kids from neurodiverse kids in general ed, so they feel comfortable how to interact with kids that might look different and communicate differently. So that would be something that might be helpful for to maybe for neurotypical kids, students.
I think so. I've done this in 2 other districts, create that continuum of services. And one of the things that always kind of struck me is by isolating kids based on their disabilities, like having only this service or this service or this service, lends itself to a lack of understanding of diversity in our community. So I know that when we have students with higher needs, when they go out into the school, the students don't, like you're saying, Ms. Schiff, the students don't understand the differences. They just see some kid that's different and they don't know how to deal with it. So one of the things, by putting the students more in the gen ed environment, like starting really early, like when they're at Maddie and they're little and we don't start pulling them, that as that student grows with their peers, the peers don't think anything of it. They just see Billy as needing something different, and kids are the most adaptive. It's us adults that get in the way. So as we keep them in the gen ed environment and have them be a part of their community, that diversity awareness grows. Something else that one of the more than one training that I'll be implementing with our gen ed staff is diversity training, diversity awareness, so disability awareness. One of the things that I've been sharing in that SPED Spotlight is we'll take one disability each month and give a little tidbit about what it is and what it looks like and how it affects student learning. One of the opening trainings that Superintendent Decker and I are doing with principals, and they'll take it to their schools, is going to be on disability awareness and what does it look like. So we're going to be embedding that in our whole admin training and in each of the school site trainings. So they start to not only understand what the different disabilities are, but what it looks like, but more importantly, how does it affect a student learning? Because I can tell them a student has autism. I can tell them a student has ADHD. You know, I can tell them that a student has an emotional disability, but most teachers, unless they work specifically in the areas of disability, don't understand how it affects a student's learning capability. So we're really building that awareness, but then turning around and giving them tools. Now you know what it looks like. Now you know how it affects a student's learning. So what are some things you can do to make the curriculum accessible to the student? So we're really given the why.
Can I add?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add about the what it looks like piece?
Mhm.
That also some attention get paid to what it looks like when they're not in the classroom, because
yeah.
their relationships happen on the playground. They happen in the lunchroom, they happen in the library, that, you know, how it presents in a classroom with very structured settings
Mhm.
is, you know, a small picture of it, I think, for some of our neurodiverse kids, that they're, you know, and what it looks like outside the classroom. Because that's where the other kids are going to notice, I think, a lot more about what that kid can do or can't do. I think in the classroom, in such a structured environment, sometimes they tend to look a lot more like their peers, but let loose in the wild, you start to see some things that you wouldn't see in a
Yeah.
classroom.
I think that's true about some adults too, but I won't. go there.
Totally.
Yeah.
We all look good out in the
I
wild.
guess when I speak of a school day, I think of the whole thing, but you're
Yeah.
right, when I'm communicating. So something, so we are addressing the full day. What does it look like in a sit-down learning environment, which as I taught both gen ed and special ed, and I never had a sit-down learning environment, so I'm already opposed to that. But we talk about, we're addressing the whole child. We've increased and have further involved social emotional counselors. We're really, I've added an extra behaviorist to our district because we had one which is not accessible in real time. So we've got two now, and we're splitting our campuses. Now also have a program specialist. We're adding a behavior support classroom for our grades 3 through 5. So we don't have to keep sending kids out, because once we send a kid out, I'm not going to get them back. It's very hard. Because that's another thing, when you have parents asking for those non-public schools, then those students are only around other students with disabilities. It's almost impossible to get them back because they're not at the same rigor and pace of instruction that's happening at their home school. So trying to build that awareness to parents about what does it truly mean to send your kid out. So I'm trying to build that awareness too.
I had a
other-
question. Sorry,
Yeah.
before I had a question just to clarify. So when you mentioned about, and I'm sorry if you explained this in the last presentation. So when you said that, you know, the special ed teacher is gonna be in the classroom or collaborate with the general ed teacher, we're still gonna have paraeducators helping out for kids that they will be on the second tier. Is that right?
So let's talk about the purpose of paraeducators, because I believe Ms. Coase said something as well too. Historically in the district, we've done what is called full inclusion. Full inclusion is not necessarily appropriate for some students. So if we have a paraprofessional with a student and they're sitting in a gen ed classroom, but they're not engaged in the instruction that's going on and they're doing their own thing in the back corner, that's not appropriate. The student, we're looking for meaningful opportunities for engagement with their peers. If they're not able to access the curriculum that's going on in the gen ed environment, they should not be in that environment during core content instruction. A paraeducator is what is called supplementary services. So they are not certified to provide instruction. They're not certified to give core content instruction. What they can do is provide student support for those students who might need help organizing their workspace during instruction, or a student who gets distracted easily and might need redirection constantly, or a student who needs support during transition time. If a student is unable to access the curriculum in the gen ed environment, if they literally can't do the work, it's not appropriate for them to be in there with or without a para during core content instruction. So we're not doing away with paraprofessionals, but we're really zeroing in on how to use them. If you look at research, it actually shows as more restrictive to have an adult on a student's hip their whole day, if you don't have a plan to fade that support away, because you take away the ability for a student to learn to be self-sufficient. You take away the ability for a student to make decisions on their own and learn life skills. So that's the balance we have with the use of paraprofessionals appropriately. So another layer of what we're doing in the district is to, and we already started that before winter break this year, is giving our paras appropriate training on what the students they're servicing look like, what their needs look like, but then again, what is the purpose of a paraprofessional? What does that support look like? So we're not doing away with paras, but we were not using paras appropriately before. So we're really looking at what is the purpose of a paraprofessional? When is it appropriate to keep a student in that gen ed environment with para support? But when is it also appropriate to maybe pull them back a little bit? So what we're getting away from is this, or this, which is what we've done here. We're going to utilize all those spaces in between. If a student, in order to appropriately access what they need to do to keep learning, if they need a para for support, then they're going to have it. But we have too many one-to-ones. We have, by having a one-to-one, we have students that are dependent on one person. And sometimes I'll speak as a parent. Maybe I let my child do something because it's easier for me. So we're still utilizing para support, but we're starting to rotate paras so they learn all of the students on their campus. So if someone's out, the student doesn't freak out, and we have appropriate services and we have someone they're familiar with. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Ms. Schiff. We're continuing with para supports, but we're really zeroing in on the purpose of paras and making it appropriate for the students to still have access to appropriate curriculum and services. Boy, that sounded like a politically correct statement, but I hope I explained it okay. So, Ms. Jacobs? I saw the finger come, but I didn't.
Yeah. Maybe you could explain it in your prior presentation, but is co-teaching meaning the special ed teacher and the gen ed teacher? What does co-teaching exactly mean?
So I introduced 5 models of co-teaching, and that doesn't mean all kids are staying in the gen ed no matter what. We're identifying which kids it's appropriate for. And if you think about that full continuum, you're still going to have kids who need to be pulled out for help, but they might stay in the gen ed room for core content instruction. And then they're pulled out for reinforcement, reteach, and to drill down to their identified areas of need. Co-teaching models is appropriate for students who can access the gen ed curriculum, but they might need some real-time services and support while it's happening. So it could be some models we have teachers truly sharing the teaching responsibility. So if a teacher is really strong in science and maybe the special ed teacher's strong in science, but they know how to differentiate the instruction. So every kid in their class is getting it in a different way. Then that special ed teacher might teach a lesson and the gen ed teacher might support. Sometimes it means that the gen ed teacher gives the core content instruction. And then for a reinforcement activity, both teachers take a small group and reteach or refocus or do another activity that might reach all the students in a different way. Sometimes it means that one of the teachers is giving the core content instruction and the other teacher is maneuvering throughout the class looking for those kids who are struggling, and they might bend down and say, you know, help them in a moment, or identify them as a student who might need to get pulled out for another activity after the core content's going. So again, we're getting away from the one model serves all. So it's going to look different based on any given lesson and at any given moment, depending on what the students demonstrate that they need. So that could be something that I share with all of our parents, is what kind of co-teaching models that we are using. And I even have a presentation that has little video clips so you can see what it looks like, but that might, does that sound like something I should share? Okay. Let me see. I'm making myself notes. Thank you. I'm working, it hasn't been a focus because there's been other things that have been taking my time, but I'm working on expanding the special ed part of our district website. It can be so much better, and it will be. So hopefully those resources can go on there as well. What else? Ms. Karbowski, we discussed making sure that all students are part of all school communities and not isolated. I agree with that so much.
Yeah, and obviously my son's on a different track than the co-teaching and things that you'll be doing.
Not really.
Mine's more about hiring and keeping the staffing, whether that be, and I know it's hard, and I know people talk about, oh, well, Windsor can't keep teachers because of the salary or this or that, but I really believe that lots of teachers work not just for the salary. And just unfortunately recently we've had, you know, our teachers aren't coming back, and it's not because of the salary. They've actually said they're not getting the support they need, whether that be the support from paras or whether that be just too much on their plate. A lot of the hirings that I've in the last few years with my son have been teachers who are also in the credential program. So they're also going to school while they're teaching, and they're just not getting that support. So that you're thinking, okay, they're going to stay with us because they're getting their credential, and no, we're going to give them a signing bonus and all that, but then they're not staying. So my thoughts would be more you or your staff diving into that. Why are these teachers staying? If you can do like an exit interview or a questionnaire or a survey, like, why are we losing staff? Why don't we have a lot of speech therapists and so forth? I know some staff move on because they move or they get married or things like that. That's understandable, but it's not understandable when they're not getting support for our kids. And it's like, I want them to have more support so they'll stay and work with our kids. And so knowing that you're going to have this co-teaching and all it, you know, it's great, but it also starts with having good teachers that feel valued and feel supported and want to stay and work with our kids.
Agreed. Thank you for that question. I've already been drilling down because once I recognized and was given more information and understood the relationship and what NCC is for a district, it's basically just an agreement with some of our surrounding smaller districts that can't create a whole program, that will take their kids on and will service them. I've already drilled down, and and I met one-on-one with each of the staff from that program that are leaving. So I'm well aware and I won't get into it right now, but I'm well aware of what we're lacking. And there's already things put in place to change that, starting with the next school year. I'm taking more of a hands-on approach with that program. And so you'll probably get more information from me than previously from the district director. As far as we have three I'm looking at my cheat board, sorry. We have 3 teachers from that program that are leaving. One of them's retiring. One just had a baby, but one did specifically cite two of the 3 specifically cited lack of support. And the person who retired came in and gave me some very valuable information. And I also met with the paraprofessionals. That's a really tough gig for some of the kids. That's our various highest needs kiddos. As far as intern teachers, I actually prefer a new teacher because they don't come in with preconceived notions. They're not okay with keeping things the status quo, because we're really moving some and changing some things going full force this year. I want people that want to do good things for kids. I want people that are willing to think outside of the box. And obviously with all the data and with all the areas that were marked for improvement, we have to do things different. We don't have, our kids deserve better. Our teachers deserve better. So I actually will take a newbie any day, but we've got to give them that support. And so I have layers of support and mentors signed up for the beginning of next year. So they have that one-on-one person that they can go to. I'm implementing a special ed lead on each campus. So they have someone they can immediately go to. Every single one of our teachers has my cell phone number, and they text me and call me all the time because I want them to have a response right away. So all of those layers are being put in place. That being said, you mentioned specifically speech therapists. I'm a little worried about that. And it doesn't really, we're actually one of the higher paying. We just upped our salaries. So as we can't cite that we're the lowest anymore, we're actually on the higher scale now. We gave a retro salary bump. So anybody who worked for us this year got a retro 6%, and they're getting a 6% raise for next year on top of that. What is happening with school psychologists and speech therapists specifically, if you look at the projections for the next 10 years, there's not enough people going into those programs to go into that field to meet the projected need that we have going forward. So we actually have a nationwide shortage on in speech therapists. So we're trying to grow our own. So we're sponsoring interns from universities and building them up and giving them experience in districts so that they'll want to be here when they graduate. But nationwide, there's not enough people training to be speech therapists to meet the projected need nationwide. So one of the things I had to do this year, which I didn't like at all, was utilize some speech therapists through teletherapy and having a para there to support the physical part of it. I've been going on national websites. I've been advertising nationally and creating incentives, but I'm too short. I'm not short, but I'm 2 therapists short. I'm missing one for the high school, and I'm missing one for our little kids over at Maddie. I've got agencies looking. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do there. We might have to utilize a teletherapist again, and I am so opposed to that. But you're right. I don't know what to do about that one. So we're trying. But yeah, I've interviewed every single person that has resigned at the end of this year. So thank you for that. Ms. Jacobs?
I don't mean to take over. If anybody has anything.
You're fine.
Okay. One question I have is this being rolled out in the same way through Cali? Because I know sometimes there's like differences, and I'd like those teachers to be supported as well.
I didn't even know they were a charter until halfway through the year, so they're part of us. So there's no differentiation on my side. MTSS is being rolled out at Cali just as well, just as hard. The difficult part is they are dual language. So
Yeah.
some of the initiatives get slowed down because if you think about instruction, it's like a 50-50. So that creates a barrier for special education. If you have a student who's already struggling to learn, and then you're trying to teach them another language that's not a home language for them, sometimes we have to move the kids to the non-dual language school because the learning is so difficult already. But any initiative we're doing is district-wide, and Cali's part of that. So the principal there, Sharon Farrar, just accepted our assistant suit position. So she'll be moving to district office. And we're doing a really hard push for that standardized curriculum district-wide. So I know that they're going to be looking for a new principal. But some of the things she successfully implemented at Cali are going to be pushed district-wide as well. So that's kind of exciting.
Okay.
And I'm just seeing that there are chats there. Let me look at them in just a little bit. Is there anything anybody put in the chat that I haven't addressed? I think we addressed it, everything. And Ms. Coase, I meet with the North County Consortium superintendents once a month. I just met with them last week. So I'm getting a pulse on what their needs are as well.
Okay. We haven't been, we did NCC preschool, but then moved out of that. But one of the parents asked what it was because not everybody.
Yeah, we're getting away from
in it. You don't know.
Yeah, we're getting away from the NCC label because it does, you're right. It's just an agreement. It's not, I don't know at what point it became its own unit, but it shouldn't be. It's part of our community. Majority of them are our students. And even we take kids from other districts who are not even in special ed for other areas, and they are our students. We don't differentiate them either. So that's, you're not gonna, you might hear it as far as us talking to, because I have to get staff used to not using the term NCC. But it's just a classroom. It's just a special needs classroom, and it meets the needs of our students. So you're gonna start to hear that kind of drop off.
I have one question about Mary Beth Sandy. You mentioned that she was going to you now?
She's gonna be district wide. Her focus is gonna be on the high school and the middle school, but she's a special education program specialist, which is a district level person. So.
Okay, I just wanted to double check because
you will still have access to her.
That was
not a problem.
Okay, very self-centered question is, okay.
No, I recognize where her strength is. And I'm so excited because when I started kind of identifying some of the initiatives we're going to be doing, boy, was she on board, and she's been contributing to that as well. So I've got her focusing on middle school and high school because I want students who are coming into the middle school to start to understand what's going to happen when they get to high school. So we already get them on track with what they need.
She is super parent responsive. Like she has been amazing. She'll get on the phone and talk and talk.
I bribed her. I said, chocolate, coffee, what do you want? Tell me, I'll get it.
Parents need to know that she's out there. She is.
No, she's amazing. The teachers love her.
She's amazing.
Yes. And then one of the things I forgot, it might have been Ms. Karbowski. So some of those students who are on who have higher needs, they're on an alternative curriculum, which is still standard-based learning, but they might not learn as much. Like they're not going to be able to absorb. If you've got a standard that a teacher's teaching to, and there's 20 objectives under it, we might focus on 10 for them to get them the core content. There's an initiative right now for even students on an alternative curriculum to get them on a diploma track. So I keep reviewing it because there's different paths that we can take. I don't know when that's going to go through, but we're starting to push kids back into gen ed and give them that standard-based curriculum. So the rigor and the pace might be different for kids with higher needs, but it's still going to be the same standard-based curriculum. So that's what I'm moving towards. So that we should have very few kids on certificate track. I feel like we have way too many right now. So as kids are moving through our services, we're going to see more kids on a diploma track. It's just going to look different. So, are you all willing to be a part of the group? I'm sorry, Ms. Schiff, go ahead.
Oh, well, actually, if maybe kind of probably related to the question maybe you were gonna ask, what would be the best way to kind of get feedback from other families, how things are going during the school year?
Well, I wanted to do some surveys, but I know there's been way too many going out. And parents about had it. So I would like a core group like this. I know there are some people that accepted but didn't come because I know we're in summer. I want a core group to just kind of be that link between parents and schools. Okay, Monica, I'll be sending out information. Thank you so much. And then my hope is that I'm going to have little parent trainings. So parents, we'll have activities where parents can kind of come and learn what their rights are. They can learn what an IEP should look like, because we're going to be doing those a lot better. And Ms. Schiff, you were a part of that. So I hope you know what I'm talking about. We're going to get more detailed with our IEPs so they truly reflect what the kids' needs are. But I'm hoping to have some parent university classes. I don't know what to call it. I'm not that witty. So just have workshops where parents can come to. I want to have open Q&A sessions, maybe once a month, where I just pop onto a Zoom and parents, whoever want to show up and ask questions. But parents always have access to me. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I'm hoping you all will help me with that going forward. Parent university, you've heard it that way? Okay, okay. Sounds sophisticated, I like it. Maybe I'll give a little certificate of completion. I'm not sure. Are you all willing to still continue to be a part of this focus group and community discussion group? Can I keep inviting you to these types of things? Yeah, okay. You gave me a great focal points, and I would like to have these once a month and kind of alternate the time so different people can come. So maybe, every other month will be later in the evening, maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, so we can get parents coming home after work. And then alternative meetings will be earlier in the day for those parents who are only free when their kids are at school. So I'll kind of alternate it. Eventually, I'd like to get some in person. We're having a little COVID outbreak here right now again. So my whole side of the district office is empty except for me because I was subbing. It didn't feel like a celebration at the time, but I'm very thankful now because I got to avoid everybody. But we got a lot to do. We have a lot to do. So was this helpful? Yeah. Okay. So we'll be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm trying to find the end.